Welcome, everyone. A very good afternoon to you all. I've just seen from, and thank you for your patience for letting everyone join the meeting. I've seen there's well over 100 people giving up their lunch hour to join us on this very important, I think, discussion we're going to have about the last 20%. Most people say it's the last 10 yards at the hardest, but I think in the world we're in now, the last 20% is getting harder and harder. I'm very pleased to be joined today by a stellar panel of very experienced producers, entrepreneurs, who I think embody the chutzpah, resilience and ingenuity that I've been proud to see across the UK industry for so many years. So my name is John McVay. I'm Chief Executive of PACT, and I've had the pleasure of working with many of the participants today as PACT members, but also with the UK indie sector, who I think have showed a lot of ingenuity in terms of shaking every tree to find every single penny to bring back into making great British shows. So I'm very pleased to host today. We will be taking Q&A, so there is a way for you to get questions in, and we'll be answering some questions at the end of our discussion. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. I'm just going to start on my screen in no particular order or hierarchy. So Bav, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hi, everyone. As you say, I am Bav. I work in the media and entertainment side of ITV, and I work in the commercial team. I run something called B Studio, the B standing for branded entertainment, and I work with brands and our shows and platforms to connect them in creative and entertaining ways.
Oh, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Hi, my name is Bo. I'm the Chief Executive at Off the Fence, which is a specialist factual studio. We've been trading over 30 years. We sit next to a cable portfolio of channels, and the genres that we specialize in is wildlife, history, and science.
Thank you, Bo. Damian.
Hello, everyone. I'm Damian. I'm CEO of the Story Collective. We're a scripted sort of mini content studio. We have a few umbrella companies that we back and support, and the central function for all that. And we operate in the scripted space. I'd say 70% drama, 30% comedy, but personally, I don't like the division between the two. So anyway, that's a different panel, that one.
Yeah, thank you, Damian. Daniela.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Neumann. Nice to see you all here. I have worked in broadcasting, commissioning, and I've been running production companies for about 15 years now. So I really understand the challenges that we are all facing. And I think we all need to find or just start working in a very different way. And I think it will become the new normal.
Thank you, Danny. Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm the MD of a scripted company called Clapperboard. Produce scripted programming in the UK and in the US. And also I'm the MD of a non-scripted company called Chalkboard. We focus on documentary formats. We also have a partner company in Glasgow called Storyboard. So we just love companies with board in the name. So if anyone's got any ideas for other, let's get in touch. But yeah, really happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for those introductions. I'm just going to give a little bit heads up to set up the context about why the last 20% is becoming so important and often so difficult. We've seen over the past few years from the post-COVID boom a decline in UK broadcasters' license fees. We've done some research into deficit increases across all genres for producers in the UK, and they're going up annually. And not just in those areas where you'd expect to see big deficits in high-end drama, but across all genres. And we're seeing it increasing in factual. We've seen, obviously, pressure on our domestic broadcasters' budgets, a decline in the licence fee, 30% in real terms. That's £1 billion less available to the BBC to invest. We've seen a decline in advertising revenues on our commercial free-to-air PSBs. And that was all leading to a difficult situation where we've also seen our international distributors, who invested heavily during the boom, are having trouble giving the advances that they once did. Recoupment periods have gone out much longer, so there's less money available. We're seeing our international buyers changing their buying patterns in terms of what they want. So it's all putting a lot of pressure on the production community. And we did some research 18 months ago, which showed that of 15 dramas commissioned by the BBC, they were taking 2 to 3 years to close their finance. So they were editorially greenlit, but not financially greenlit. And I imagine that's something that you've all experienced. So what we're trying to look at today is solutions, your ingenuity, what trees are you finding? How difficult are those trees to shake? And there's many trees that have been posited over the past year or so in the forest of financing. So we're going to try and look at some of those. So I'm just going to sort of pick some of the trees and then see from who each of you have you shaken that tree. If you have, is it a good one? Is it a bad one? Or what challenges does it bring? One of the buzzwords that I've heard from many of my members over the past year or so is branded. That's the solution to all the problems. Just get some branded funding and we'll all be hunky-dory. Now, Bav and Bo, I know this is an area you have both been very active in. So, Bav, could you tell us a little bit about what your experience of that is? Is it the magic pot at the end of the rainbow or not?
I'm not sure it's the magic money tree. No, yeah. I don't think so. But look, yes. So my entire world is about working with brands and bringing them into ITV, as I say, in kind of creative ways. So beyond the standard forms of advertising. There are two kind of core things that I'll probably talk about here, both of which involve my team working very closely with producers who we commission shows from for ITV. One I would say is helping fill the gap afterwards, or helping close the door after the horse has bolted, however you want to phrase it. And that's the world of sponsorship and partnerships. And so we look for so this is where we commission a show up front, and for those shows we look for sponsors and partners. Increasingly over the last 15 years, the way we do this is what we would call it in a much more 360 way. So beyond the bumpers that you see around a show on ITV, so Argos sponsors Coronation Street or Specsavers sponsors Emmerdale. So beyond that, we're increasingly finding more ways for the brand to activate that sponsorship or partnership in and around the show. So that might include product placement. So if we stick with the Argos example on Coronation Street, Sainsbury's also have a shop front on the street, or just off the street, in truth. And so that's a significant part of their sponsorship and partnership. We also increasingly including social and digital elements as part of these campaigns. So that can range from simple branded social posts on the Coronation Street handle through to bespoke created content for the brand that brings the two worlds together in different ways. And then the final piece of this is licensing or use of the IP. So we would license the show IP to the brand to use across their platforms, whatever they might be. And so, if you've got a retail footprint, as Argos have, you might see Coronation Street appear within their retail footprint. You might see it on their website, etc. So all three of those kind of levers that we have to pull or the brands can access involve revenue shares back to the producer. So in all of those instances, we work really closely with the producer, because editorially it's the right thing to do, and because we want to kind of build that relationship between the brand and the show. And then secondly, it's in their interest because they benefit. As I say, that's after the fact, and that is once we've commissioned the show. The other route is ad-funded programming, or what at ITV we prefer to call ad-funded entertainment. The entertainment being a critical point for all parties. That ultimately it's not about it. It has to be more about the audience than it is about the brand or the financial package that brings that show to air.
So that sort of thing would mean it wouldn't be like a Sainsbury's product placement in it. It's more the sort of experience of the show being resonant with the brand rather than visibility of the brand in the show.
The brand might be visible as well, but really what we're saying is it doesn't matter whether the brand is in the show or not. It's, does it work for the audience? Is it a show that our commissioning teams at ITV would naturally commission irrespective of how it's funded? That's kind of the start point. So the ideas have to be great, the content has to work, has to feel like it fits on ITV's channels. Sometimes the brand will show up within the show, other times it won't. So we launched or relaunched my department just over 2 years ago. In 2023, we aired 3 ad-funded shows on ITV. In the 2 years since, we've aired 30. So
Wow.
you can see that that's obviously significant growth. I don't need to do the maths to explain that, but that just shows that there is a demand and an appetite from all sides of this to try and bring these shows to air. And so we have had success, but and you know, it is a great opportunity both for ITV and for the brands when we get it right. What I would say though is that it's not a straightforward process, and you need a number of things to align to get to a point where you're getting those ad funds away. You need the right idea, you need a brand who's got the right ambition and intent, can unlock the money, which isn't easy, especially more recently. Times feel like they're getting tougher for brands. But it can be done, and when we do it well, there's great success for everyone. So a great example is Marks and Spencer's and Cooking with the Stars. You know, we've had 4 seasons of that show air on ITV1 in peak, and that was from a Marks and Spencer's brief into us. They'd done a bunch of stuff with us previously, but they wanted to do something in food with celebrity, with kind of a shine of an entertainment show. And we didn't have anything off the shelf, so to speak, already commissioned that worked.
Already cooked.
Yeah, already cooked. Thank you.
Yeah.
No ready meals here.
Yeah.
So we worked with South Shore as the production company, and with our commissioning team, and we came up with this format, and so it's run since then. So that's a really great example of when it works well for everyone.
Thank you. I've got one question because it comes up when I'm talking to some of my smaller companies who aren't in branding and they're worried about it. Well, how does it work editorially? Is there a lot of interference from the branding, or are you allowed the same creative freedom? I mean, that's often a tension or a question for people. How have you found that, given that you've increased your volume of this type of programming?
Yeah, so it's kind of what we see as my team's role in the process, and so we've built up our credentials through sponsorship and partnerships, where that tension can also exist. If a brand is spending millions of pounds to sponsor a show or to product place in the show, sometimes their expectations are different to what we think is appropriate, either from an Ofcom compliance point of view or from an editorial point of view. So I used to describe it as there's a chasm between these two worlds, and it's my job to try and bridge that chasm and find a place where we can all meet happily. I'd like to say the chasm has narrowed somewhat over the last few years, and there's a much better understanding from both sides as to what makes sense. And like I said, starting with that point of this is entertainment first, it has to work for the audience first, allows us to have just really good open conversations. And I would say being really clear on expectations and shared objectives up front. I know that sounds, like a really obvious thing to discuss, but those kinds of things can just set you off on the right path from the beginning. So every brand is different. Yes, some brands will really push the margins or the boundaries of what feels reasonable. Absolutely, that happens. So my team's job is to try and mitigate some of that and support both sides, both the editorial people and the advertising brand, in trying to find mutual ground and work through those things.
And so if I was an indie commissioned, just a small point, if I was an indie commissioned by ITV, I could come and work with you to try and find some brand funding for the show?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So we work two ways. One, in response to a brief, but also if an idea is landed with a commissioner but they can't fund it for whatever reason, we can help proactively find a partner for that. And we worked with a wide range of indies. As a great example, we did a show called Alan Titchmarsh's Gardening Club, where we secured the revenue from a brand called Green Thumb, and that was working with the indie producer on that. So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Bo, could you tell us about your experience of working with brands, the good, the bad, the ugly, or?
Well, in actual fact, brands is not a big thing for us, like Bab, because if you're a specialist factual, documentaries are just not as noisy in the schedule as a fact-end show or a drama. So it gets a bit trickier. And we work with a lot of production companies to get things funded. On average, it looks like a pre-sale somewhere or a co-pro with a distributor attached, and then you go and find the remaining money. And where we found a lot of success is philanthropic funding, institutions, sponsorships. There are some brands, smaller brands who can't afford airtime that kind of break through. But I always advise production companies to look at themselves and at their core. What is your core genre? And then within that genre, what institutions, what monies are available, what interests? Because what is exciting right now is there is a lot of money out there. Any business out there needs to be in the audiovisual storytelling because we watch so much content on broadcast and off broadcast. They don't really understand it. And there are some really old financing pipelines which are breaking. So one example, for example, we working in natural history, all the tourism boards around the world love to celebrate their country through biodiversity. They used to have big deals with National Geographic, but now National Geographic going non-linear, those are all falling apart. And they just don't have the reach or the understanding. So as Bav was saying, you have to be this chasm, this translator, and bringing them in. And what's really good about tourism boards and these kind of institutions, they bring in 20, 30, even sometimes 40% of the remaining gap.
Wow.
And what is really good is, because when you look at the pre-sale and the co-pro and the distributor, they are usually not very cash flow friendly, 20%. But this middle bit, they are very cash flow friendly. So although it feels like a pain, it's really worthwhile targeting them.
Yeah. So give me an idea of some of those. You mentioned the tourist boards. What other ones? I mean, Welcome Trust was in this space for a while. People like that? Yeah.
Yeah, for example, we worked with Ancestry.com on a anniversary documentary where literally we were using the institution to do some DNA research. So they were innate in the storytelling. And very quickly, and they are quite far advanced when it comes to these type of deals because they've done many. But it's literally the more you know your genre and any brands or products which are attached to it, seek them out because they're looking for stories that they can put their monies against.
Yeah. So it's not just about just your programming, it's more about your business as a particular specialty or a sweet spot. You've got to market more in that way, not just the program. Yeah.
If you distill yourself as a storyteller, what stories do you innately tell? And if your development slate is very, very broad, it's trickier. But if you are like a crime producer or a wildlife producer, then it's actually, when you look through that prism, you will see a lot of brands and money out there who want to be attached, and they all need to be in the audiovisual storytelling.
Yeah. And then in approaching these tourist boards or trusts or charities or funds, how do you start that, just to give people an idea of how do you knock on the door? You've defined your core proposition. How do you knock on the door?
It is literally cold calling. I mean, it's the most painful way. And then you cold call, and then you also realize they don't speak your language. As Beth was saying, you have to do a lot of translation. And what's helpful from Off the Fence, because we've been around for 30 years, a lot of the programs by the channels have had their sponsorship and they remember the program. So we can make those bridges. And these brands are out there and they are looking to fund programs, but they don't go to MIPCOM, they don't go to these markets, they don't even know it exists.
That's why I was asking the question. Yeah. They're not the usual market. Yeah.
So literally, I went to the World Travel Market in London, and you walk from stand to stand and say, hello, do you want to make a TV program? It's that painful.
Very good.
I was just going
I'd love to see you doing that, Bo.
I was just going to add. Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Again, we work with a few production companies who have become really good at kind of finding funds from tourism boards. Rock Oyster is one that springs to mind, which is an indie label. And what's interesting is that these aren't marketing budgets in the traditional sense. They're not coming at this from a traditional advertiser perspective. They usually have a content budget or that they want to spend to create content specifically. So it's not a marketing team necessarily. It's coming in from a slightly different place. And so I do think, to Bo's point, with a bit of hard graft, bit of cold calling or turning up at the right conferences, there's quite a lot of these pots of money to tap into that wouldn't come through to me via media agency in the normal way that kind of we operate.
And what's really the change is, you can't sit down with these clients and pitch your idea, because they're not experts, so they don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's an idea.
Yeah, they're not commissioners.
No. So you have to turn your pitch around, and you have to come with the horsepower. That's why having the co-pro, pre-sale, and the distributor attached, at least there's like, well, what's the reach, and how do I get my name out there? And if you come with an idea that has no reach and you expect them to fund it and give it reach, it's too tricky.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Any other panelists had any experience using brands?
No, I mean, from a drama perspective, we like you, John, keep hearing how brilliant it is, but haven't had a couple of conversations with companies that are setting up to probably doing what you're doing, Bav, within ITV. They've got the expertise both sides, and so they're brokering, because to your point, Bo, you said it just then, people talking different languages. So in a way, it's rife for somebody to come in and facilitate. I think the trouble with drama, I mean, Mike will have a view on this as well, and Mike's really, fantastic at finding drama at a price point. But even then, the price is so high that it's
is it too scary for the brands? Yeah.
And is it going to be absolutely, without being editorially compromised, absolutely in the sweet spot? So it feels like it's the way it's going, and drama which I guess will continue to exist. We believe in it. We'll have to find a way of tapping into it in some form. In fact, one quick question for you, Bav, is I was just wondering, given your portfolio of drama, internal companies, and the output that you've got at ITV, whether you are at least having some discussions about possible involvement in drama, even if it hasn't played through. I don't know whether you go down that route at all.
Yeah, so it is definitely the trickiest territory to explore. Like you said, sometimes it's to do with cost. But even if you're just doing a product placement deal, the timelines for drama can make it really difficult. If you're trying to secure money 18 months before a TX from a brand, that's not necessarily straightforward. So that's another challenge. And then the authenticity of the moment or whatever. We do it extensively in the soap, so there's that. We have done a couple of product placement deals in drama. We did one in Trigger Point, for example, and we've also got one in comedy with Go Ed coming up later this year as well. Both of those were with Amazon Prime. Or Amazon Echo for Trigger Point and Amazon Prime. So there's an advertiser who is specifically seeking out these opportunities. So it is pretty rare, though. Beyond that, Damian, it's a very fair point.
You hear about it a lot in film, don't you? I don't know whether it's apocryphal. You hear that the James Bond franchise makes the deal with Aston Martin, has a bidding war between Pepsi and Coke at what's going to sit on. There's those big franchises.
Also, film isn't subject to the same broadcast regulations. So,
John, come on, loosen up a bit, man. No, I just think it's. But you're absolutely right. But I use it as an example of in the world that I'm in and that Mike's in on this panel. And by the way, I just did want to say from the off, it really is a different experience depending on the genre you're in. I mean, we can all, it's fantastic that Bo and Bav can talk to this. It's much more tricky for us. The numbers are different, the gaps are different. In drama, it's often not, to your point about the BBC having 15 unfunded shows. It's not, that isn't the last 20%. In some cases,
sometimes it's the last 60.
70, 60. It depends how expensive. So I think the principle's the same, and I love that we're exploring it. But it's I notice over in movies they've been
active on this for a long time. It's much easier to do those sort of deals.
Sorry, go on, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, we did it once. I think the priority as a producer is, can you do a deal that will go directly into your production budget, which is what you want, and often it's the channels, understandably, that are negotiating those deals. We did a deal on one of our shows with Amazon Prime, actually, that we did directly. That funding went straight to the budget. I think we got away with it. There was a character receiving an Amazon Prime package, and she said, "I only just ordered this yesterday." You know, no.
Good dialogue,
nice.
Mike. Good dialogue.
Yeah, I think we just about got away with it, and yeah, certainly we'd be up for exploring it more. But generally, we haven't pursued it. It's been managed through the broadcaster.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm picking out for that is it can work really well for some things, but it's more challenging for others. But a producer's got to sort of like Bo go around and cold call and knock on different doors. You're not going to commissioners. But if you have got the commission and some money in place, you're more likely to find that money going forward. Danielle, have you had any experience of branding? If we've got nothing else to say on that, I'd like to go on to the other great money pot at the end of the rainbow, which has been talked about for a while, which is co-production. This has been, the BFI just produced the report which showed that co-production in the UK has actually declined over the past year, while everyone thought a couple of years ago that co-production was the way forward. So, you know, trying to get other people's money from different territories brings its own challenges, editorial and rights often being at the heart of that. And anyone want to speak to that?
Shall I say something? Because it's been the bedrock of drama for years, with the exception of the fact that the streamers have come in, and when you make a show for them, generally they pay for all of it. That's a different. Yeah, there's no last 20%. That's again a different panel.
You get your 100 plus.
You get your 100 plus. But I think and I don't want to be gloomy because and I'm not going to be gloomy. I mean, I'm just going to say this as a backdrop, so I don't get accused of being gloomy. Getting any show, I can just talk to drama. Getting any big drama picked up by a UK network, so call it the BBC or Channel 4 or ITV. Sky, yes, but Sky seem very willing to take the international risk. But getting it, you know, which is where most of the commissions still come from in terms of volume. Getting it picked up there, you generally, almost always, occasionally you can get away with just a distributor. I know, Mike, you've done that once or twice, we have. But generally, you have always needed a co-production, and generally it's always come from America. There are obviously exceptions. You do a little bit with ZDF and people have to adapt, and there's this sort of European coming closer at the moment. That is such a challenge anyway in boom times. So that's why I don't want to be gloomy. It's always, each one is a needle in a haystack. There's always 5-10 times as many greenlit shows looking for that money. But what is a bit of a challenge is that a lot of those American platforms, broadcasters, just are not really, you know, they are more closed for business in a way at the drama side of things than the UK is. So HBO, FX, there are 3 or 4 others that you would go, you know, AMC, they would, you know, a lot of the big British shows were co-produced with AMC. They're just sort of closed for business. They don't say they are. Yeah,
well, that's what I'm hearing in the market.
Yeah, they're closed. So,
they're closed,
you know, but the good news is that firstly, we're all entrepreneurial producers, and we'll look at other territories. And the other good news is that BritBox, both Mike and I have lots of things going at BritBox, are doubling down on the opportunity. Yes, they don't have as much money as HBO, but they are able to have their pick of shows and build a relationship with BritBox if you're in the drama business. And, you know, you've got, if you can make it add up, you've got a really great partner there. The same, bizarrely, although they only do a few a year, goes to MGM Plus, used to be called Epix. And although they're part of the Amazon group, they operate autonomously. There's a couple of announcements coming out with BBC shows that are co-proed with them. And Acorn occasionally can do it. So part of the AMC group, but not the big AMC co-pro. So you just, you know, so for us, co-pro can mean millions and millions of things, but it generally meant, and it was like sort of 80% of dramas 10 years ago were done like this. It basically meant the American company that's going to come on up front, where most of the budget, the money they put in is going to the budget, maybe a broker's taking a little bit if they brokered it. And often they're paying more than the incumbent, more than the BBC, more than and then with a bit of distributor money, you're set. So there's less of it about, but it is still very key, in my view, in making drama. Sorry, I'm being drama specific. The others will talk.
No, it's okay. Sorry, Mike. Danielle, have you? I just want to bring Danielle in to get some of her perspectives, because as ex-commissioner, being on the buyer side and running indies now, you see it both ways, from the difficulty that the broadcasters have, but also the challenges for indies. So in terms of what we've been talking about, what's been your key learning or opportunity over the past couple of years?
So I would say there's a few models that we've used really successfully, and they all have pros and cons. So the obvious one is getting a distributor's advance to get something over the line, and I've had it with the BBC, Channel 4 and ITV, where they've said, yes, we want the show, but you've got to find the rest of the money. And that is great in one regard, because if you find a distributor, they believe in it, they put the money up front, absolutely fantastic. But you have to remember that that's actually your profits that you're giving away.
You're basically in debt till it's recouped. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that would have been your profits that you might have put into development, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you make those difficult decisions. If it means that you can keep staff employed, if it means that you can make a really great series, then of course you're going to go for it. The other problem with a distributor's advance, which we've sometimes had, it's all well and good, but when it comes to series 2 or series 3, the distributor might say, I've got 40 of them, I don't need any more, don't need any more episodes, and then you have to find a different way to fund it.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of, it's one way of doing it. And then you can push the problem down the line, really, about, having a problem of how to fund series 3 and 4 is a good problem these days. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's you want sort of distributors to enter in some sort of life of series type, but
absolutely.
they're more challenged now as well. Yeah. No, I hope.
So I was going to say the other model, which I think sometimes people use the word co-pro, but actually I see it more as pre-sales, is something that I find that as a producer, I've had to get stuck in more like a distributor. And I think it was Bo that was saying about cold calling and door knocking. And I've literally picked up the phone to broadcasters and platforms around the world and gone, hey, we've got this great show. Do you want to put in a bit of money? And even if I don't 100% quite know what I'm talking about, you pick up the phone and you blag it and you learn about distribution. And so we've definitely pieced together budgets like that. And I think much more in the way that drama people are more experienced at doing. And those advances have made a huge difference. But there is one thing I feel very strongly about that people shouldn't shy away from, is if you're going back to the broadcaster and you're going, okay, this series that you liked, I can now bring it to you for this price. But the only way I can do that is because I brought in money from other territories. So in return, you need to loosen up your rights situation. And don't be afraid to push them on the rights situation. You need to be able to get the money from elsewhere. If you're offering it to them at a cheaper price, they need to offer flexibility on rights.
I've heard that a lot recently, as people are having to negotiate more complex deals, that the primary rights that domestic broadcasters seek can often cut across that and stop investment and leave money on the table. So I think what you're all brilliant at is getting the money to give the reward to the broadcaster, because they get 100% of the value on transmission. Bo, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, it's just another reason of what we saw why there is a decline in co-production is because of the staffing and restructuring at the broadcaster side, and actually ushering in a co-production is as heavy as a commission, and they just don't have the time or the resources, and they bottleneck. But what we did see is that the pre-sales are going up. So it's like pre-sales with a light editorial touch, and they are also the type of money which is more readily available throughout the year, rather the co-pros. And as we discussed earlier, actually stacking up a co-pro and the financing, they quite often fall apart because they're not within the same timelines. But pre-sales really work.
Thank you, Bo. So as I say, there's a forest of different opportunities, and we just don't have the time to do all of it. So I'm going to pick another tree out from the forest. Tax credits. Hotly debated, hotly sought after. Ireland's just introduced a tax credit for unscripted, a very competitive rate. Mike, you've had a lot of experience of tax credits both here and in other territories. Are they sorting the problem, or are you just spending a lot of your time having to fill in lots of applications and do audit trails for various fiscal incentives in different countries?
Yeah, I mean, they're an important part of our business. In fact, a key part of all of our finance plans. I think and to Daniela's point and Damian's as well, actually, the majority of our shows we've done without co-production, often because we're working with a broadcaster that wants us to work at speed. Co-production doesn't happen at speed, but also because of the budget levels that we've been able to navigate. So, but tax credits have been a huge part of that. I think when we used to be purely non-scripted, so we never made a drama until eight years ago. And so when we started making drama, we didn't really, we were learning it on the job, and we kind of benefited from what we didn't know. But we were making, I think our first drama we made for about $500,000 per episode, which if you come from non-scripted, you're like, that sounds like loads of money. Let's do it. And then you realize how many people are on drama productions. Since we did that, we had to find ways to kind of close the finance plans. We were navigating below UK tax credit, and it's worked for us as a business. We've done quite a high volume of shows. I think this year we've done kind of 40 shows, and that sounds great, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows because they're really tight budgets. Where we've tried to focus is put as much creative and commercial focus on tax credits as you do on editorial, and those endeavors are as important as finding an idea and getting a commissioner to say yes. I have a frustration that I've talked to you about a lot, John, that most of the shows we've done are set in the north of England.
Yeah.
In Hungary, in the north of Spain, in Ireland, in Malta. We put revenue through these countries, entry-level jobs. And to me, it should be in the UK, but it's not, and that's not the way the system is. So, some of our shows we will have free tax credits on. We do a show called The Good Ship Murder that we've done a few series on, and that is filmed in Malta. We get a Maltese tax credit. We use Hungarian crew. We get a Hungarian tax credit, and we do the edit in Ireland, so we get an Irish tax credit. So,
right.
Being honest, doing the shows abroad is really kind of labor intensive. It's not without risk. Obviously, tax credits and tax rebates are very different things as well. So you have to be willing to take that risk. You're working in different countries, different currencies. You might get your tax credit back a year and a half later. You might get it back sooner. So then there's a cash flow issue to that as well. And we've made it work out of volume because we've been lucky with the relationship we've had with Paramount. We also when we came to drama, the budgets just seemed quite inflated. It felt like it had gone that direction, and I think the last few years it's coming down the other way, as we all know, as we've tried to kind of eke ourselves up. But tax credits are key to our business, and will continue to be.
Can I just add? I think for drama, and I know, Mike, you found it by actually managing amazingly to make brilliant dramas, when you started out under the tax credit. No other drama producer was doing that anymore. It just didn't seem possible. And then you found tax credits elsewhere. But for drama, tax credit is generally, if you come from that background, last 10 years, it's like you do it as you basically say, I'll probably get 20. I get 20% net in the UK, probably get that roughly anywhere. Yeah. And you just sort of, so if your show's a million, you're already like, okay, it's 800,000 I've got to get. It's like a kind of just at the top of your. But there are a couple of things I wanted to say about it, even in drama. Like your point there, Mike, the example you gave, where you're getting Hungarian crew to go to Malta to shoot something to get, that is a very, and you're obviously brilliant at it, the best in a way. And I think, but I don't underestimate how much, pro con, cost benefit analysis you look at, because we've often looked at bringing crew to, how much UK crew do you take out if you can get the UK tax credit when you're shooting somewhere else? Sometimes the benefit is countered by the cost of getting the crew there. So it's not just as simple as, oh, great, Hungary will give me 5% and Malta will give me 20%, I'll take Hungarian crew over. You can soon find in the travel and the accommodation, and this is before we even talk about whether they're the right crew. So what Mike's working out there is not simple. It's really, really complicated, even if he's got 3 tax credits available to him.
Yeah, because they all have different conditions as well. They all have different requirements.
Yeah, and you are where you do post all the time, because you'll always get the tax credit back here subject to various tests. And it's better to be doing post here if most of you are here. But, on the other hand, I just want to say one other example, which makes me realize how complicated it is to finance things. It's a sort of a bit of a running joke, but it's sort of in the air. Like, there's a kind of running joke over here that any show at all. And by the way, it could be set in snowy Scotland. We go, can we do it in the Canaries? Just because at the moment, the Canaries has a kind of 50% tax credit. Now, we're always editorially led and we don't mean it. But those conversations never used to happen. It's because the challenge is such that if you can, with the right level of quality control, go to a place that doubles your tax credit, that is indeed your last 20%.
Well, I mean, if you looked at the recent series of The Night Manager, it was all shot in Colombia, which has a very generous fiscal incentive. And I suppose that is a question, though, with these incentives and us chasing them or trying to chase them is, how do we balance storytelling that's British? I mean, I'm not saying The Night Manager isn't, but it driving us towards a more sort of global perspective because of the incentives. Mean that we have to consider doing things in those territories and actually, using them in a way as the backdrop for the story.
And it's not helping the UK, is it? If Mike's he's got a show set.
I agree. I'd much rather he spent all his money in Manchester.
It's ridiculous.
In Bradford, actually, John.
Or Bradford. Oh, sorry.
Careful, John.
Careful. Yeah.
I do. It's true. I mean, we will often very openly go to a broadcaster with a blue sky pitch because we want to film it in a place that's sunny, that has a really good tax credit. If you've got that relationship with a channel, you can do that. You can design shows where they're set and where you want to film it. And I think commissioners are more open to that than ever before. I always look jealously at Ireland. I think Ireland's such a fantastic tax credit setup in every sense, in non-scripted, in scripted.
Yeah.
You only need to look at why are Fox doing all of their non-scripted shiny floor shows there? Why are there comedies there? Why is there lower cost drama? Why is there high cost drama? Why can't you get crew there? It's a vibrant industry, and it's what the UK should be, in my opinion. Things need to change.
I was going to just say...
Sorry, Damian, I want to get on another point because I'm trying to cover quite a lot of the forest. Just talking about the Northwest and Manchester, I mean, we've seen publicly funded screen agencies, really move into the sector over the past 10 years. Screen Yorkshire, Northern Ireland Screen, Creative Scotland, with sometimes soft public money, not always. Have you been using that money? If you have, is it been useful? Is it not useful? I mean, right now, we are actively working with Tracy Braben in the north to look at new screen support there. We're working with the southwest. So there's going to be more soft public money coming. Who's had experience of using that money and how did you find it? No one? Oh, well, maybe you will in the future. So one of the other things that has long been suggested, excuse me, I've got a man flu. I won't get any sympathy for that, but I'm about to cough. Excuse me. One of the other areas is private equity, VCs, private sector finance. I've always been shocked that, given the UK is such a dynamic and very successful audiovisual economy, we've not seen more people from the city trying to invest in our projects. I mean, there was EIS and various other tax incentives some time ago, but the government switched them off. Danielle, have you had experience of that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it is a growing area that there will be more private investors. I've worked with a company whereby an individual had a fund that he could spend on putting money into unscripted, and he might actually be doing scripted now, I'm not really sure. And the rights aren't always the most favourable, but if it means that you're cutting out the commissioners / broadcaster, why wouldn't you do it? And sometimes it's the only way to get things done. And absolutely in the UK and in the US, my experience is that it is a growing area and there are more people doing some in a much more structured way and some in a less structured way. I'm actually have fully funded a premium doc at the moment through private investors separate to that. And also they sometimes put money into development. So that's a really interesting area to explore.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting because obviously development's the riskiest part of the business, isn't it? And interesting from some of our data where we're looking at the final 20%, we're seeing producers putting in their own production fee to close the 20%. And I worry because that's the money we need for development. That's what keeps the lights on, but also keeps the ideas flowing. So I think that's very helpful. I mean, I'd like to see more opportunities for that. We're currently campaigning with the government to try and open up the R&D tax credit to our sector, so you get 20 pence in the pound back for all your development spend. But in the current circumstances, they're not very keen. So great. We're going to be coming up to questions shortly, and I've already seen that there's quite a few coming in. So just before we get to that, sort of final perspectives. You're all working really hard. You're adapting. You're changing. You're understanding different opportunities. What else would help you? And I'll just go around individually. What else would help? I can anticipate some of the answers. Bav, what do you think would be a boost? What would help?
Well, I'm coming at this from a slightly different perspective to everyone else, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, one thing we can all unite on is a better economy would be pretty helpful, right? Which is a very obvious thing to say. But given I'm so reliant on advertiser spend, that market uncertainty is generally unhelpful. The other thing from an ITV point of view is when we have a hit show, again, very obvious, but Love Island is it's a bit of a money machine for us because it's been such a successful show over many years. So the next hit show is always helpful. And then beyond that, brave advertisers, advertisers who are willing to take a risk, do something bold, but always rooted in insight and an understanding that what we do together can deliver on their objectives.
Thank you. Bo, what would make the world a happy, sunny place for you? Or sunnier? You're muted, but yeah.
I think we work with a lot of production companies, and what would be helpful if production companies don't look to broadcast to tell their stories, but actually look where else their stories can be told, if it's short form, long form, podcast, and focus on storytelling and where the audiences sit. Because when there's an openness to where this piece of content should sit ideally, then we can bring our broadcast intelligence to it. But I think being a bit more promiscuous in your financing and being a bit more playful as to who needs to see, who needs to fund this, would make it a bit more colorful and a bit more creative.
Thank you, Bo. Damian.
3 quick things. One is very simple, and I know you work unbelievably hard on this, John, and the dysfunction of Mike shooting Bradford in Hungary tells you everything you need to know. Our tax credit obviously isn't quite working.
Yeah.
So I don't do the maths, the government does the maths. So if we can not have our own shows leaking when we've got shows coming in from other places, that would be good. The second thing is, and this is just a sort of a wishful hope, commissioners are very risk averse because it's a difficult environment, and that's kills creativity and it kills spirit. And I'm looking for a little resurgence. You know, we had COVID, we've had the strikes. I'm looking and hoping for a little resurgence. Maybe it's just coming, where we have some bold commissioning, and things like Adolescence and Baby Reindeer show you how things can, if you're brave, can be great. And that would just be helpful in terms of commissioners and buyers. And the final one is, in our world of drama, there's quite a dysfunctional, I don't know whether you've ever tried to address this, John, at PACT. Maybe it's unaddressable, but there's a kind of dysfunction whereby essentially the BBC and Channel 4 and ITV pay the same amount for every single drama, give or take. They pay their £1 million for the UK license broadly. I know they might try. And actually some shows aren't going to travel. The international rights just aren't worth very much.
Yep.
And others are. And the same with cost. How can we make a show that isn't going to travel for a better cost? Maybe these are dysfunctions that can never be fixed, but I'd love to see that a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah,
Because I don't want to say that. You got all nervous there.
No. Look, one of the points about the cost, I think commissioners need to educate themselves more about the realities of the current market, not how the market as it was. We did have a type of financing over 10, 15 years, but it's changed, and you've all just articulated how much it's changed and everything you're doing to trying to negotiate that. But I think it's incumbent on our commissioners to understand that world as well. And it's particularly true of scripted comedy in the UK. It doesn't really sell internationally, but people expect that you can get a big sales advance for it, and it's very difficult. So point well made. Danielle, what would make the world Sorry,
John, can I
Bav,
just very quickly? Can I come into in for the defence of the commissioners?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't
sorry.
really having a pop. But
No, I know, but what I would say is equally, everybody needs to understand the economics of what's going on in terrestrial television. At the moment, it is very challenging. There is no hiding from the fact that audiences have declined. Advertising revenue has declined as a symptom of that as well. And so the economics within our business is a pretty challenged as well. So this is a symbiotic relationship, and both sides of the fence are pretty challenged as
just to say, I'm not saying more money should be. I'm not saying more money should be spent. I'm just saying maybe it should be deployed with nuance. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Okay, Danielle.
So I've got two things. One thing I feel really strongly about. One is much more obvious, which is, yes, commissioners, please think about what it's like at this side of the fence. Endless development is not going to help anybody at all. Number one, we all know that. Number two, transparency would really help producers. So when broadcasters and streamers are talking about, yes, we're open for factual commissioning, factual entertainment commissioning, producers should not shy away from saying, how many shows are you planning on commissioning this year? And that way, as a producer, you can go, okay, do you know what? I'm not going to put all my development spend in here, because they say they're open for business, but they're only going to commission 2 series this year. So I'm going to spend my development money over here.
Yeah, I think a common theme I'm hearing is about efficiencies. We need to be more efficient in commissioning and production, because we're wasting a lot of money.
And that's about being transparent about what you're really doing.
Yeah. Mike, I might anticipate what you think would make it better for you. I think you touched on something, but how do you see the world getting better? What could be done to make your life better?
Well, I feel really optimistic and positive, and we're all coming with our different perspectives and experiences. But for me, certainly in scripted, it should be and could be the golden age of scripted television. There is a world where more productions happen in the UK than ever before. I think there's two aspects to that. I think people need to reimagine what is an acceptable budget that can get you great cast, that can get you big ratings, that can deliver quality. And we started on our drama adventure. Our producer said to me, you can't make drama for less than 3 million per episode. And I thought, oh, well, we're in trouble then. But of course you can. Of course you can. And in the most part, if you're not talking about fantasy, sci-fi, viewers don't fall in love with that aspect. They fall in love with stories and characters and scripts, and production values have to be good. I'm not saying that's not important, but I think there should be and there will be a reconfiguring of what is an acceptable primetime budget and what you can deliver quality on. And when that happens and is acceptable, there will be more production than ever before in the UK. Of course, for that to happen, as you were anticipating, the tax credit needs looking at on a number of different angles. And again, different companies have different pressure points and different perspectives on this. Certainly from ours, it needs the threshold needs looking at. If the threshold would change tomorrow, we would set up a production company in Bradford. We would bring 3-4 shows if we were lucky enough to get them commissioned there. And there's a dozen other companies who are the same. So I think there's so much opportunity, but it's just things have to change for us to be able to grasp it.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike. That was very upbeat, positive, future looking, which is what we all like. I mean, my takeaway, and we'll come to some questions, my takeaway is I'm just so impressed by how all of you are adapting and seeking new opportunities, being resilient, and I think for our audience, I think that must be the takeaway, that resilience is, if you're going to get your stories to your audiences, resilience is more important than ever. And I'm very impressed by each of you individually in terms of how you're doing that. So we're going to go to some questions that I've got up here. There may be other ones coming in. I'll just take one. Oh, this is one for you, Danny. Tax credits for unscripted. Have you used, Ireland's just introduced one. Have you used any tax credits for unscripted?
I wish I could say I have, but no, that's not actually, that is, yes, I have. I have. Sorry.
Oh, where were they? Let us all know.
Yes. Well, so we used to make programs for RTE, or actually Rare TV
Right.
still makes programs for RTV. So that's an obvious one. But I can honestly say it's not my forte, but it is a world that I've dived into. And I know that you've been doing so much work on that, John. And it will definitely be a growing area.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a question which I think it really goes to the work that you do, Mike, which is about sustainability, about having to travel around the world to try and get a show made for UK. Clearly, that's got issues around travel, its impact on the planet. How do you offset that? What do you feel about that? Is that something your domestic broadcaster talks to you about?
Completely, yeah. I mean, we have to work doubly hard. I mean, I think one thing I would say, and this is both a positive and a negative, we limit the number of HODs we have from the UK who are traveling out there, and we limit the number of casts. I mean, a lot of our lower cost dramas have limited casts anyway, so we will often be casting local and limiting the number of casts that we come out there. But the teams work really hard on the other aspects in terms of sustainability. We liaise with brilliant organizations like Climate Spring, Green Rider, so it's a focus, and it's obviously we work with the channel in terms of what we need to do as a production. I wish that wasn't the case, but we limit as much as we can.
Yeah. Yeah, you're still, but so it's not that you're just gung ho. You're still taking your commitments and responsibility. Yeah, absolutely.
We comply with everything, but as I said, we have to do in the UK, but we offset it as much as it's humanly possible.
Yeah, I got a question which Danny, you might be able to. I mean, Bo did a very good explanation of cold calling and knocking on doors in terms of the sort of the charities or other foundations. How do you go about that for private equity? I mean, the city is famously quite a closed shop with its own, cultures, customs, and so on. How do you start to enter into that world?
Well, it takes a long time. There are some organisations that you can, if you look up online, that they're now officially structured, that you can find them online that say they invest in media content. So I would suggest that's your first place. And it is growing. And in the States, I've had an agent help me find private investors. I wouldn't have been able to do that without a US agent. So I definitely recommend that for the US. In the UK, I literally looked online. And then I'm slightly, not sure if it's a good thing or bad thing. I shamelessly went through LinkedIn and looked to see who were like to call themselves private investors. Some people, they have some money.
There's a good tip for everyone.
And, you kind of go, oh, that's an area they're really interested in. I'm onto it now. I have to say it's as shameless as that.
I don't think that's shameless. I think that's resourceful and very good. I think we're nearly coming to the end of time. Is there anything, final thing before we wrap up, that anyone feels you wanted to say that we've not covered yet? I know there's lots of other nuances that we could get into and some other details, but I don't think we're going to have the time to that. But was there any final thing you'd like to say?
I'll just say that, sorry, it's very general. I sort of said it earlier on. Getting a show greenlit and on air and funded is unbelievably hard. We all do it because we love it. And therefore, tenacity, flexibility, the fact we've talked about all these new areas is the way you do it. Producers have been doing this from the dawn of time. Well, that's not true. They didn't exist at the dawn of time, but since we've.
I'm sure they did somewhere
in some form. But so I just want to say that I see the kind of challenging economic environment as just okay, it's slightly harder than it was. It's never easy, and you have to put absolutely everything into it, and you have to be flexible. So I hope people come away feeling like it's been helpful, but not that it's gloomy, because we're all still going at it and we love it.
Yeah,
that's all I've got, really.
Damian, I think that's a wonderful. One other thing I should have added into my summary of all the skills and talents you need. I think you just summed that up really well, and I think it is that the takeaway for everyone is passion. Yeah. You do this because of the passion for the stories you want to tell, the content you want to make, and I think that's one of the defining characteristics of British production, is the amount of passion we bring to the whole thing. So thank you so much for all your passionate contributions today. I really appreciate it, and I hope our audience did as well. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a lovely afternoon. Bye now.
Thanks, John.
Thank you so much.